Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. So today I'm very excited that I have a special guest, Noelle Mering. Thank you for coming today. I'm so happy to have you. I feel really honored that you took the time to come and talk with me today and to my listeners. I think this is going to be a really good episode. Noelle Mering is a fellow at Washington, D.C. based think tank, the Ethics and Public Policy Center, where she co-directs the Theology of Home project. She is an editor for Theology of Home, co-author of the Theology of Home book series, and the author of Awake, Not Woke, a Christian response to the cult of progressive ideology. She studied philosophy and theater at Westmont College in California and did graduate work in philosophy at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. Noelle and her husband live in Southern California with their 6 children. Wow, 6 children. And you're still smiling.
Well, they're not all even all children anymore. A couple of are adults now.
Not alphas. I do know you have quite a range of children, correct? What is the range?
23 years old down to 11.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love it. Children are great. Noelle and I attend Our Lady of the Assumption Church in Ventura. I'm there every day. Noelle and her husband come in quite often. I mean, you're there almost every day.
I'm at Mass somewhere every day, usually.
Yeah. I typically, you get used to seeing the same people all the time. And I listen to a lot of podcasts. And it must have been on YouTube also because I saw you. You were being interviewed by Scott Hahn. And I was just like, oh, wait a minute. That's that lady that goes to Mass. And I thought maybe I'm seeing things. I was just so happy to see you, and I just felt like, wow, she is really out there doing this. And it was right about the time I was getting ready to start my podcast, and I was feeling a little bit anxious about starting it. I wasn't sure what kind of reception I would get from, I don't know, like even my coworkers at the church or my family for sure. I just was like excited to see you, and I pretty much accosted you in the parking lot.
No, you were lovely. I think I was startled at first because I wasn't expecting someone to come up, but you were very sweet and lovely.
I was just like, oh my gosh, it's that lady. And I was so happy to see you. And I've just been wanting to get you on my podcast this entire time. So I just feel really honored that you're here. So I'm interested in you telling me about your book series, Theology of Home.
Yeah, so Theology of Home, I started it with my old friend of mine from grad school at Franciscan University. We were in the master's philosophy program, and we had lost touch for a number of years, as people do, and we reconnected somewhere around 2016, 2017 through social media. And she was already a prolific author at that time, and we realized that we both had similar passions and interests, and also this history of friendship that was special and meaningful for both of us. So she had come up with the idea to do something with the phrase theology of home. Actually, while she was on her treadmill, she was thinking about, how much homecomings populate our cultural imagination, from the Odyssey to viral videos on YouTube of soldiers coming home after a tour and reuniting with their family. And we got to talking about how universally compelling home is, as an idea and also as a place and a reality, not just in a confessional Christian sort of way, but just in a very human way, that there is something about it that speaks directly to a human natural longing, belonging, to have safety, to be nurtured, to be in community, all these things that are really give it a real foretaste of what heaven will be like. And we realized that also the corollary was true as well, that it can also be a foretaste of what hell is like, when there's strife, when there's division, when there's, abuse, so many things that can go wrong or become disordered in home life and in family life. It can feel so isolating in a way because you know what it ought to be, and so then that canyon of difference, that juxtaposition of what you imagine your home life to be and then what the reality might sometimes feel like, that can feel really lonely and isolating and hard too. And so it just felt like a place that really deserved to have more thought put into it, and that we wanted to show it in the visuals, like through the cultural imagination, not in an aspirational way like Architectural Digest or something. Though beauty is important, physical beauty, material beauty. Part of the beauty is that it's not about luxury or self-service. It's about pointing us to something higher and inviting people in, and that it speaks to something deeper than just the mere fact of the material beauty. And so, we've created this series of books. We have a fourth one coming out this summer, written by wonderful woman Emily Malloy, who's just started working with us, and Carrie and I just did the foreword for that one. But Carrie and I had written 3 before, from 2018 to now. And they're with a wonderful photographer, Kim Bale, who's local here, beautiful photography. And it's just full of imagery of, families, husbands being helpful and not looking like they're doofuses or something that I think you often see men portrayed as in media. Women who are pregnant and, not just meant to be objects of sexuality or something, these real human themes. And part of it was really intentional because I think Carrie and I both do so much work fighting things that we see in the culture that are corrosive, radical feminism or woke ideology. And so much of the success of those types of ideologies have been through capturing the cultural imagination, through visuals, through TV shows, through magazines, through storytelling. And we realize that, if we want to reorient the culture, not just a Theology of Home project, but a lot of talented people need to stop ceding that cultural landscape to people with ideological agendas, that there really is a depth of beauty that is not only human, but very Catholic. Catholic Church has been at the helm of leading the way in the world historically through architecture, through art, through craftsmanship, through all these things that, those things have really been important. And the Catholic Church is an incarnational faith that treats the material world with dignity. So for all those reasons, we really wanted to create this idea of home that is both visual and evocative. And I think that the deeper part of it is that idea of being the foretaste of heaven, but just the idea that what you receive in home both roots you in your past and your origins. It tells you where you come from. It also points you to a purpose. It gives you a mission, and it gives you all those things that are safety and nurturing and belonging. Those actually equip you to go out and be brave, to take risks. So it's kind of a paradox in that way. And I think it's so much like the Catholic faith, that in the Mass, we are taking something that happened 2,000 years ago, and the priest is representing it. Do this in memory of me. It's not just that we're remembering it, it's that we're making it new again. And we're pointing us to our final destination, right? And so home, in a way, really human way, does that as well. It tells us where we come from. It points us to where we want to be. It's something that's sort of outside of time in that way. And I think that those types of things in this life are really important to answer and to think about with great seriousness, and not kind of write it off as something trivial or something that's fluffy or unimportant.
We'll be right back.
Rising anti-Semitism. New generations redefining how they connect with Jewish traditions. Changing dynamics among Jews around the globe. Take a deep dive into these topics and more on Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, the podcast brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Hear from the thought leaders, politicians, scholars, and artists at the forefront of Jewish life today. Subscribe to Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, wherever you listen to podcasts.
So I just, interestingly enough, the last episode I did was on families. So I just did this episode about the joys and everything of family, but then also the traumas of family and being raised in a family. I think, what you're saying about the home and the church, I think, that's something that is so vital. Like, God wants us to have a home. God wants us to be married, to have our families intact. Everything's so broken apart, fractured these days. And, I think the people that have it good, when I say good, where they're intact, maybe some take it for granted. Maybe some don't even realize that's an option. You know what I mean? Like in this day and age, children might not realize, people back in the day used to actually live in one household. I think, like your children are being given such a gift because they're being raised by the same parents and the same household. It's like, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's been a real effort to make family life seem sort of oppressive, that there's a kind of an old trope that I've seen in so many movies of, domineering man and underutilized woman. And then maybe you can find freedom by, having some, illicit affair. So, Bridges of Madison County, or, I feel like there's just so many, that Revolutionary Road, there's just so many movies and TV show that reiterate that same theme over and over again. And I think it's effective in a certain way because that's how powerful the family is. And so I think the family has been father and family life have been targets for decades, or actually probably centuries, but they're also the remedy, right? They're targeted because I think, well, certain movements, but also ultimately the devil knows how powerful and important family life is. And it's interesting to think about that each member of the human family has been targeted in a way that's redefines him into opposition to himself. So men are to become soft and weak. Women are to become calloused and hardened, and children are to be stripped of their innocence. Because in each way, they're being targeted in the way that to make them what they ought not be, right? Children should have their innocence protected. Men should be strong, not in a way that's oppressive and domineering or for his own self-aggrandizement, but in a way that is holy and virtuous. The strong man is the virtuous man. And women should be not soft, but they should we have a superpower of being really relational, where we can welcome people in. Our bodies are meant to welcome people in. We carry life within ourselves. But we also have a really magnificent ability, I think, through virtue and through grace to bring someone's troubles into our hearts, into our minds, into our homes, to help to try to extend generosity and comfort and healing to other people. And it takes a certain sort of softness in order to have that kind of welcoming spirit. And I think that, women for so long have been treated as though with the sexual revolution, there's so much that our natures are too valuable and vulnerable to endure, that the sexual revolution asked us to endure. And I think it makes sense to me that we developed a callus around ourselves, to protect ourselves, because in a way women have been left unprotected for so long. And so women have become very hard and harsh, and I think we sort of celebrate that now. But I think in all those ways that the human family has been targeted in very specific ways that we're asking each of us to go against our nature.
Yeah, I really agree. One of the things, I wasn't going to get to this yet, but it just prompted me was, I find it fascinating in this day and age that I'm not going to say anything miraculous here. I think everybody's going to know what I'm talking about. I'm shocked at the attack on our children today. Our children used to be the most precious thing that we would just protect no matter what. I've talked in another episode about the mother bear syndrome, you're protecting your child. I just feel like Satan it's just so targeted to our children right now. It's I feel like everybody's walking around like a zombie, or not everybody, but people are just like a zombie. They're just so when I picture people their eyes spinning because they're not thinking clearly. And I'm thinking, why are we allowing these things to happen to our little precious children, stealing their innocence, like you say? Satan is he's just going right after the kids.
Yeah, in a way, he's overplaying his hand, and I think that that's helping people see more clearly now. But I think part of the confusion is that it's really confusing living in a time of rampant ideology. It's meant to disorient you. And most normal people can't wrap their heads around some movement being so sinister as to want to expose children, young children, to adult sexuality. That it's incomprehensible to your average person. And so I think even that is the advantage of the movement, because then normal people just kind of retranslate what they're seeing or hearing is happening and just think, well, no, it can't really be that. There must be something else happening, or it must just be about compassion, or, and with some people in their minds, it might be. I speak oftentimes about how we have to understand we can't have that the woke movement is not a blanket movement. Your neighbor or your sweet Aunt Susan who is woke isn't necessarily this sinister person who wants to corrupt the innocence of the youth. They might just be a truly good-willed human person who just thinks that this is about compassion, and they want people to feel welcome, and they don't want people to feel marginalized. That's understandable. But there are gradations, I think, operating here. And that lends to the confusion also, because then you think, well, my nice woke Aunt Susan is part of this, and she's such a good person. And so there can't be this. And it's a real disconnect. It's hard to reconcile was actually happening. But I think more and more people are starting to see it over the last couple of years, particularly when a lot of the stuff being taught in schools became more apparent, more clear through locked school shutdowns and library books being exposed and all of this. So there certainly is part of the movement. And once you understand what the movement's aims are, targeting the innocence of the children are directly integral to it. The innocence of the child is a form of dominance for a cultural revolution. You have to disabuse children of innocence because their innocence points to a standard. It points to a norm. And if you read the literature of queer theory, it's all about disrupting the idea that there's any sort of norm. And so you have to queer the culture. You have to disabuse anyone of any possible innocence. Their innocence, it protects a hegemonic culture that is blocking the revolutions. You have to target the children according to the movement.
So I was raised in a very liberal household, and that was my world. Didn't have a religion, a very liberal household. That was my life. I didn't know any different until I married the father of my children, and he was raised very conservative. He opened up a different world for me, and my mind kind of changed a bit. And I've recently started listening to the Daily Wire more. And I now am getting what I think is a clearer picture of what's actually happening in the world. Now, I know some people would go, well, that's a slant the other direction, or whatever. But I just feel like when I hear things now and I'll think, is that really happening in the world? And honestly, it could be just somebody's word against another, but it's not. It is actually happening. It's very scary. I mean, when you talk about the books in the library, people don't want to talk about that. They don't want you to know that those books are in the library. They're so disgusting and graphic. And it's why should our little children be learning about any sexuality in the school? Why? Why is that even in there? That would be cringeworthy in a Barnes and Noble, a school library. You know what I mean? So I think these children are being led down a path, and their parents are allowing it. They're not stopping it from happening. They're enabling it.
Yeah, to various degrees. I think some parents probably still aren't fully aware of what's happening. But then, there are parents who are more actively think just as for my child's good to expose them to this type of thing.
Yeah. Like you say, it's kind of there's that line. Is it, I'm trying to teach my child to be loving and kind and accepting of people. Okay, that's fine. There's other ways to maybe do that. I don't know that you have to go to drag queen story hour.
Right. Or some of these books, genderqueer, they're like comic drawings that are incredibly pornographic and also involve pedophilia, so it's documented in, many school libraries. So it's not book banning. It's always prudent to have age appropriate material. And certainly getting rid of pornography from children is not a matter of book banning. It's just being responsible.
Say something about it. Again, I'm not doing this, but I'm seeing that when parents are concerned, they're saying, why do we have this book in the library? They're immediately being shut down in school meetings and say, oh, no, you can't talk about it. It's what do you mean?
And that's a sign of something going really awry, no matter how you look at it, that an education and parents should have similar aims, right? Education system and parents should, by nature, want the good of the child. They want the freedom. They want to raise kids who are free thinkers, who can think critically, entertain various sides of an argument, and have powers of analysis, and oriented towards truth and goodness. And so once the parents become so broadly the enemy of the education system, that's a sign that something has gone really wrong. And maybe people look at that and have various diagnoses, but it certainly should be raising alarm bells.
Well, and I feel like I've said in another episode that, all of a sudden I could be wrong about this, but I feel like teachers, doctors have more say in what's happening with our children than we do. It used to be complete opposite. If a parent wanted us to put a stop to something or wanted something to happen, the parent was in charge. I remember back in the day signing a paper saying I didn't want my children to be in the sex ed class. I wanted to teach it at home, and I had that right. I don't know that I could do that today.
No, there's a movement to take away that right to opt out of sex ed. That's right.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of glad I'm not raising them right now, but I do have, I have 7 grandchildren. So it concerns me, especially because my children aren't religious, but this is probably an obvious question, but what prompted you to write Awake Not Woke?
I started writing about the woke movement just for articles, 2017, 2018. And I think the thing that just felt compelling is that it just seemed like it was so much more happening under the surface than what it seemed like. It became really clear to me quickly that this is not a movement about politics. It's about answering fundamental questions of anthropology. What is a person, yielding great confusion. That's why we don't know what a woman is now. And I think in some ways we don't know what a man is. So it seemed like if we were it was corrupting our ability to see fundamental things with any correspondence to truth. And so once you do that, irreparable harm can come from that, right? If you get the fundamental questions wrong, because people want answers to very fundamental questions. They want to know, where am I from? Why am I here? What's the point of my life? Is there a point in my life? And the woke movement, I think, fundamentally wants to remove meaning from all those questions. So there's no point to your life. You can make it whatever you want it to be. There's no reason why you should do this or shouldn't do that. You don't come from anywhere. You don't have a creator. You don't have a destination. It's all about the now, and these are fundamentally sound, initially freeing, but they're really deeply lead you to despair because you want to feel that there is a meaning behind things. And the sexual revolution was one of the first places that was really driven home to me, that I thought, if I can do anything I want with my body, that's not empowering. That tells me that my body doesn't really mean anything, that there's just no reason. I just listened to this fascinating interview on Pints with Aquinas with this woman who came out of the occult. And she talked about one of her, one of the pivotal moments when she came to Christ was some boy was asking her to fool around and she didn't really want to, but she didn't have any reason not to. And she just didn't know what to do. And then she just started sobbing later when she's finally on her own. She thought, I don't have a reason to, I don't have a reason not to, I don't have a reason to be with a man, I don't have a reason to not be with a woman, I don't have any reason in my life. And I think that's fundamentally what the movement does. And so it operates so much on manipulation. And I always have just had a lifelong repulsion to manipulation. I don't know, something about it. I mean, obviously no one likes manipulation, but for some reason I think I can spot it easily and it repels me. And it's just felt like this is a movement that is manipulating us on this grand scale, appealing to our compassion, then appealing to our fear, and then appealing through force. And I think so. Those are the progression of the three tactics: pity, fear, and force. And so it just felt like it has control by keeping people afraid to call it out. It's very emperor's new clothes.
I think that sometimes I think, why are you guys not noticing? I like I say, it reminds me of just this. People are like mesmerized.
Yeah, there's something hypnotic about ideological possession.
This whole woke thing has been going on for how long do you think it's been going on? What do you think shifted it into this? I think we shifted into this very high gear. I don't know if COVID had something to do with it. I don't know. It just seems like we went from one thing to just the extreme, very quickly. And do you, in your research, have you found was there a catalyst? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can start it in various points. I mean, the word woke originally was not weighted with all its ideology. It was about, it was a phrase that African Americans would say to be aware of, various dangers that might be around, for them. In the, I think, early 1900s, in the early 20th century, they would say, stay woke. And I don't think there's anything ideological about it. I think it's just a helpful phrase. Probably somewhere in the 80s, 90s, it started getting more into the academy, more crystallizing as the woke movement. I mean, I think its origins are Marxism, Freudianism, postmodernism, but intersectionality and, various really uniquely woke concepts emerged in the 80s, 90s. So it's been around since then, I would say, but it did take a real turn. I think there's an inflection point that happened in 2020. First, you have George Floyd and then COVID. COVID first and then George Floyd. So the lockdowns start in March 2020. George Floyd is in May, then the summer of rioting, lockdowns. All of those things, I think, were in various ways helping to reveal something that had been laying kind of under the surface for a long time, but also accelerate it. And so, there's a good and bad there. The acceleration was alarming, but the light is always good. Exposure is always good. We want to know what we're dealing with. And there's a phrase called the long march through the institutions that socialists Rudy Giuliani and Antonio Gramsci is also often attributed to this idea, but that the Marxist revolution was not going to happen on the terms of economic oppression. It had to be brought into identity. So it could not just be oppression based on class. It had to be oppression based on sex, based on sexuality, based on race, based on now, are you cis or are you queer? All these divisions, all these binaries. So I think that war position has been infiltrating at the institutions for decades. And, the academy, K through 12, pop Hollywood, courts, now corporations. And it just got brought into the light over the last few years. I think now people are aware of it in a new way. And I think that that's good.
When you're out and about promoting your book or your books and your projects, do you get a lot of backlash about what you're saying or no?
Certainly not intense backlash. I have had numerous events, people who were asking me pretty pointedly challenging questions, some that were condescending or insulting. Generally, I'd say I'm speaking to fairly friendly audiences. I had a weird experience once at a church in the Bay Area, and I wrote about it for Catholic World Report, but it was 2021, and I had gone to Mass, and then without a mask on, but most people were masked, and then we all sat down for dinner. There was a Mass, then dinner, then my talk. And at the dinner, I just sat down with this older couple, and when the husband got up to get wine or something, the wife all of a sudden looked at me. She said, "Why weren't you wearing a mask in Mass?" And she was furious. It's just, you're not used to someone being furious with you. And she'd been so delightful before. It was so bizarre. And I just said, why was I a threat to you when I was 20 or 30 feet away from you in Mass? And here we are 2 feet away from each other eating dinner.
Yeah.
And we're fine. But why do these, anomalies not give people some reason to pause? And the moral conviction that she felt at calling me out, and I understand that people fell on different sides of the mask thing, and I don't, that's not something I want to get into probably too much in this forum, but it was a symbol to me of how much people can be so consumed by their opponent being wrong than they are open to the idea of what actually is true in this situation, what makes sense here. So that was, one of, and then there were some very antagonistic questions in that audience that evening too. Maybe it's a Bay Area thing, I don't know. So I had some experiences with it, not too intense though.
Was it mainly having to do with your message or because you were Catholic or both? Or
there was a message. It was people who were politically progressive and were upset with me, and I think were trying to lump me in with a bunch of other political points that were not points I was making. They were asking me, how dare you support things like this about immigration? And I was like, I'm not talking about immigration at all. This is not my point of my book. Or we could have a separate conversation about that, but why are you assuming all these things? So I think it's just a way to kind of marginalize a message by making you seem bad,
My first thought is they've been hurt, by the church. And so they're mad. But I was just curious to know, because you are out and about, and I think people generally like to be angry at the Catholic Church.
Well, also tribalism is compelling for any of us, right? That's a temptation no matter what you believe. But I do think that, going back to the family, that once we kind of neutered that power of that original healthy tribe, then it makes us more ferociously tribalistic about our politics, because then all of a sudden now we have something we belong to. Now we have a moral righteousness. And maybe I have personal failures in my own virtue, and I'm struggling to feel some sort of shame about some ways in which I'm failing my family or whatever. But I can feel virtuous in this sphere. I can condemn the people I should condemn and then get some analogous virtue out of that. So there's something really tempting and alluring about that none of us are immune to. I just think it's become more ferocious now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also think that people are not feeling super great out in the world. I think, there's a lot of unrest. It's not to say there hasn't been unrest and problems in the past. I think every decade has, good and bad that have happened. It's kind of like when people say about children, oh, terrible twos, or, oh, they're great at this age. I think every year there's challenges and great things about every age of your child. And I think about that about decades. But I just think we're also aware of everything in the world today. It's such easy access. Back in the day, it was like you wouldn't hear about things for a while. And now it's just like, it's so much and you can't get away from anything. Everything's in your face. It's like I'm always surprised if somebody hasn't heard of something because it's so out there and it's just too much. Yeah. But I think people gravitate to the trauma and the, angst of the world. I don't know why that is.
Well, I think it feels there's sanctimonies attached to being outraged, right? And that doesn't mean that there's not things to be actually outraged about. There are, but there is something, there's a spiritual dynamic there where the corollary to being outraged is I get to feel sanctimonious, because how dare they and how good am I? There's something really happening there that I think is alluring, and it's too much information, like you say, and we have, we're being fed by an outrage machine. Most news outlets they're making money off of keeping you outraged,
Right. That's so true. Because they wouldn't have anything to talk about or stories to tell. And if there's peace and calm, what do they have to talk about?
Right.
So yeah, it's sad, that's for sure. So when you've been raising your children, how have you and your husband been able to navigate raising Catholic children in this world? Like, do you homeschool your children? Do they go to school? Either way, how do you navigate like how you've raised them, how you're making them citizens in the world and Catholics in the world? Like what has been what you think is working, or things that maybe aren't working and you're still working on?
Yeah. No, we're a work in progress like everyone. The things I think about, there's several things that I think are the key things I talk to parents about. As you said, one is school. What are you going to choose for school? And that's, I'm a kid from public schools. My husband went to public schools. And I think it's just now that we're starting to see, oh, okay, wow, there's real reasons to have hesitation here. We homeschooled our kids up until about 6th grade. We just start gradually putting them into a classical private Catholic school in town that's small, and it's a very kind of homeschool feeling about it. So it feels very family run. But the classical part is an important key. I think oftentimes when a school identifies as a classical school, it's speaking about things broader than just what books they're going to read. There's a culture there that is sort of trying to not be a slave to whatever is happening in modern day America. There's usually a resistance to technology, too much technology in the school, and other things like that. So I think picking a school situation is really important, and it's hard to do. I know not everyone can easily pull their kids out of public school, but I think there's a real resurgence of looking for alternatives for good reason, because parents are realizing that mama bear feeling is coming out, right? Where they're saying, okay, there's influences here that are really sinister and that are going to influence my child possibly more than I can at some point, as they spend more and more time compelled by their school culture than their family culture. So I think giving that serious consideration, making those choices with great information and deliberation is key. And secondly, I would say technology. Getting technology under rein in your home is so crucial. Once a child or teenager gets a phone, it's far easier to delay that process than it is to pull them back once they become, habituated to it. And so one of my philosophies has been delay. Introduce that technology. Our daughter is turning 16. She'll be driving soon. And so, she's like, I need maps. And so we're doing a pinwheel phone, kind of like a gab phone, so no social media, no internet. I think trying to get ahead of the reins of technology, because it fills them with so much, and us too as adults, with constant noise, visual noise, information overload, not necessarily literal noise, but just a constant way of directing our attention that is filling us with distractions and not allowing us space for silence and contemplation and wonder. And I think that's, going to be finally, a death of our prayer life, right, in our interior life. So school, technology, and then I would say, community and culture, family culture. So family culture includes, your prayer life, that you're being a family where the kids learn to pray primarily because they see their parents leading the way, and that it's not a prayer that is just, kind of a family prayer after dinner or something, but it's rather something that is, they should accidentally go into your room and see their dad on his knees, praying for 30 minutes or, whatever. Like they should see us going to the chapel to make a visit. They should see us striving to go to daily mass and have a daily rosary, have all those sorts of habits. And that the faith should be something that's really positive, that you have traditions around Christmas, around Easter, that you as a family, you give some things up at Lent, and that there's this cycle that creates like the season of changes, but also a permanence throughout their childhood, that when they get off, if they get off the reservation at some point, maybe they'll be wandering off the reservation for years. I don't know, but that there will be some pull that rooted them, that, maybe it'll be someplace and they'll realize that it's Good Friday, and they're 33 or something, and they think, oh, on Good Friday we used to do this. I wonder if I should think about that again. I think that we can't assume that those memories aren't going to have seeds bear fruit decades later even. So I think that's sort of family culture, but then also culture of fun. So my husband and I, we really make it a priority that we have fun in our marriage, and the kids know that we have fun together and see us having fun, but then we also try to have fun with the family. So beach, simple things. We've never taken them to Disneyland. It's too expensive with 6 children. But we do beach days almost every weekend with a bunch of friends. And so they're seeing all these other families interact. And we go camping. We have regular camping, camping every year. And my husband loves sports. So the kids all love the sports teams he grew up loving from Boston, So just these ways that I think can seem superficial, but they bond you together as a family unit. Inside jokes. That's one of my favorite things. Our family has always had inside jokes. And when the kids were little, I started a notebook called the Funny Things Book. And I'd write down the funny things that, Appy said this at age 3, and Campy said this at 10. And the kids grew up loving revisiting it. Every few months, they'd be like, let's read the Funny Things book. But anyway, just those types of things that really bond you together, I think.
First of all, my mom had that same kind of book. And I don't know who's going to get it when she passes away, because it's a treasure for all of us. So, she started doing that, and it's one of our favorite things. Well, I'm feeling pretty good about the fact that everything you just said, I have had just like a few recent episodes about childhood, fatherhood, families, and a lot of the things you've just said, I had in my podcast. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Excellent.
Pretty strong. I think a lot of what you're saying, again, kind of in what triggers in my mind is this whole idea of laying a good foundation. And I think, it takes effort. It takes a unity of the family, especially the parents. I have this thing called the priority pyramid that I talk about, where God and the husband and wife are at the top of the pyramid, and then the children, and everything goes down from there. If you're not properly prioritized, everything crumbles, And I do feel like what you were just saying is maybe ways like back in the day, people were raised a certain way, but somehow it's gotten off track and they're not raising their children in those same ways with these things you're talking about that are a beautiful way to make a rich family life. You and your husband need to have a good relationship. Your children need to see that. It helps them feel safe and secure. That will help them to be good spouses someday. The thing you're talking about with families, doing things as a family, making things, I say in a couple of my episodes, when you go to Mass, make it something where you look forward to it and everybody's, happy to go and put together, and then do something afterward, make it a, special day as it should be. All these things where you're, as the parents, doing them, like you say, if they see you doing things, that becomes their normal.
Yeah.
That way, when they look outside in the world, because they will with their friends or just in general, and they go, well, they're doing these things, they should have that warm feeling of like safety, security. This is what we do. Even if they venture off the path someday, they're going to go back to that, I believe. Because if you have that foundation, you're going to go, well, I was raised this way and I really like this. And, you might venture off, go have your party days. I don't know. That happens to a lot of people. But I think generally people go, oh, like you're saying, like, oh, it's Lent. Oh, I should really do, I should really do something. I think it's just laying that foundation, being strong. What I'm hearing from you also is just it's quality of life. Mm-hmm. These things you're doing with your children are rich things that they're going to remember and they're going to do with their children. I have a son who's severely mentally ill, and he is a father now of these 2 children who've saved his life. It's been an absolute miracle. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about it in numerous episodes, but his wife will text me, and he is now remembering things that his dad and I used to do that I thought he wasn't even really paying attention to. And he's doing them now with his children. It made an impression. And even him with all of his troubles, he now does these little special things. And they've come, they're in his heart.
Yeah.
They're in his soul. And that is just beautiful.
Wow. Yeah. No, that you're making threads that create a tapestry that somehow will be integral to who they are. Even if it lays dormant for years, then comes out like that. And that story here sounds beautiful.
Like one of the things that I think that not just the children are getting involved in like social media and all this noise, like you say, but the parents are getting involved in it too. And they're not taking the time to do these quality moments. It's like, oh, I'd rather go do this and that. Well, you know what? In the long run, take the time.
Yeah.
Take the time to have dinner with your family. Take the time, to do these things. Like you say, have inside family jokes, or even like things that are your traditions. I'm a big tradition girl. I love traditions. I think that's an important thing to teach. And I don't know if kids are learning that out in the world as much anymore. Like just little simple things,
Yeah, it seems like, I think technology in particular is a way of disembodying us, right? So we start to live so much in the virtual world that we're not even fully living a human one. And I think if we think about it with real deliberation, the what we gain from our kids having access to all this technology, maybe it's some convenience, maybe there's some safety there. We can get a hold of them easier. If they're lost or if they're in an accident, they can get a hold of someone, all their friends have it. They want to kind of fit in. They want to have social, credibility. How does that compare to the things we know are almost inevitably going to come? Almost a narcissistic level of superficiality oftentimes comes from, excessive phone use. Laying yourself vulnerable greatly to the opinions of other people, oftentimes strangers, who can give you really toxic information about yourself that can really weigh you down. All the attending addictions that come with that sort of technological use that makes you more slavish than human, I think, in certain ways. Possibility of becoming addicted to pornography, even the most violent extremes of pornography that can set your child up on a lifelong course of really debilitating human interactions, right? Not to mention the predators that lay in wait or are prowling through technology, trying to find vulnerable children to capture and abuse. So in no way would we ever look at that cost-benefit analysis and say, yeah, that's worth it. I'll risk all of this for the sake of these small social and convenient rewards. We would never make that deliberation. No. But we've just passively walked into that calculation. And I think that we need to step back and, just say, okay, look at what we have traded. Right. Let's reevaluate this.
When your child has a phone and their image is out there in the world, like when did our thinking change? Because if you had a grown-up man peeping in your daughter's window, that would not be okay and you'd have him arrested.
Right.
But now you have men peeping at your daughter on social media. Like when did that become okay?
Oftentimes daughters who are posting sexy selfies when they're like 15 years old in bikinis. And I just think, did dad stop existing? I don't, it boggles my mind. My husband would not, that phone would be gone in a heartbeat if one of our daughters did that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Since you wrote this book, Awake Not Woke, have you noticed anything that's gone on that you would add in?
That's a good question. I started writing in 2020, even before lockdowns. And so I was writing it all through that when everything was exploding all over the country, which, lent a certain urgency to the book. But I researched, I've been researching it slowly before I even wrote the book, but I spent 1 month intensely researching and 5 months writing. And so inevitably, there was, if I'd had another year, I probably, there's all sorts of things I think I would have done. I think I would have been more proscriptive. And in some ways I'm thinking about maybe at some point a follow-up project, whether or not it's a book or a series of lectures or something because I find awareness is so important. People need to understand what's happening. And that's what a lot of my book is. Here's what's happening. Here's why you can't be shouldn't be manipulated by it. Here's how to see through it. Here's the methods of indoctrination and then the path of restoration. I think I would have now, if I were writing the book, I would probably have the section on ESG, environmental social governance, that is invading corporations. It's a means of creating a lot of control through government, the collusion of government and corporate power and the banking system that will enforce compliance through citizens or to maintain their good standing in all these very basic institutions. So I think I would probably add a chapter or something about, that sort of corporate capture. I don't really have too much about corporations, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Are you working on anything else now, like any other books or?
I have a couple of book ideas that I've been playing with in my mind. One would be particularly about fatherhood. That's something very close to my heart, and I've been writing about in articles more recently, just the importance of fatherhood. And I'm giving a talk on fatherhood at the Franciscan University, Defending the Faith Conference in a couple weeks. So I've thought about that. Also, maybe a follow-up to Awake Not Woke. I have to find the time. I find that the speaking circuit it pulls so much out of me because of the travel. I love doing it. I love meeting people, and I love collaborating with people. I'm trying to write more about technology, about the effects of technology, the harms of technology. I feel like there's so many things I'm interested in writing about and working on, speaking about, but I don't have one big project I'm working on currently. Theology of Home keeps us busy too. We have a daily subscription email that we send out to a large subscriber network, and also a blog where we have original content, and a shop there as well where we sell our books and various crafts, mostly domestically made by artisans and stuff too. So all of that keeps me really busy too. So yeah, just a lot of different pots.
It's really meaningful to do these things, I think, to counterbalance a lot of the negativity that's in the world and try to building up the kingdom in our own way and drawing people to the goodness of life and realizing how important and short, our life on earth is, and like try to accomplish things that can help other people. I think what you're doing is great. And I'm so grateful that you came today. And I know you're such a busy lady, and
Well, likewise, it's a delight to talk to you, and I'm so excited to go back and listen to more episodes. I've only listened to a couple, but I love them, and I'm so excited to see your podcast flourish.
And I could just talk to you for hours. We could just sit in here for days. I won't make you do that, but
I'll bring in dinner maybe, but
anyway, I do appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is recorded at Wonder Mouse Studios at the Castle at Pierpont in Ventura, California. My producer and engineer is Sarah Espel, and she could be yours too. Our podcast studio is available for rent. You can reach us at wondermouse.us or freshcatholic.com.